by the media coverage the whole of the day, and it will go on throughout the night and into tomorrow, that's for sure, of the consequences of the mass slaughter carried out by at least 2 attackers on a magazine in Paris. 12 people at least were murdered in the attack. 12 people who included 2 Muslims. They were primarily journalists and other workers in a satirical magazine called Charlie Hebdo, based in Paris, about which more later. They were killed in cold blood. They had no arms to defend themselves. They were trapped in their workplace and they were massacred. It is murder, no less than mass murder, and no one can justify it. And anyone who seeks to justify it is, I believe, defaming the religion of Islam, defaming the 2 billion adherents of Islam. I believe that the idea that the Almighty God, the Lord of all the worlds, the creator of the universe, the universes, that God needs some kind of vengeance wreaked on unarmed, innocent people in a newspaper office is, well, not just disgusting as an idea, but patently ridiculous. And the self-appointed avengers who carried out this mass murder will face justice now, one hopes, and on the Judgment Day. Their attack has made the situation of French Muslims and even Muslims in Britain, already beleaguered, much, much worse. I can add another to the death toll. An unborn child of a pregnant Muslim woman has just lost her baby after being attacked in Paris, no doubt as a direct consequence of the hideous attack that took place in Paris yesterday. The truth is that murder begets murder, violence begets violence, fanaticism and extremism begets fanaticism and extremism. It's said, and I've said it, that Charlie Hebdo, the French satirical magazine, is guilty of terrible provocations, not just against Muslims, by the way. One of their caricaturists is currently on trial for anti-Semitism, following a cartoon of the former President Nicolas Sarkozy that he drew. I have seen cartoons from the magazine mocking, making fun of the Holocaust, which is a pretty sacred cow for me and for many, many others. I disapprove strongly with these provocations, but no provocation justifies murder. No one should shed their blood, lose their life because of anything that they wrote, anything that they said, anything that they drew. I'm making these points very clear because the rest of what I have to say will no doubt be deliberately distorted and traduced by the usual suspects. But I just wanted you to be clear about where I stand. And that's where I stand. The people who carried out this attack were terrorist murderers, and only a hypocrite condemns some terrorist murders whilst not condemning others, and in some cases actually facilitating others. Amongst those facilitating other terror attacks on other people are the present and the past government of France, as well as the present as well as the past government of Britain. You see, you can't pick and choose which pool of blood makes you angry and sick and which pool of blood you're prepared to pay for. The government of France has been facilitating, paying, arming, training, and providing diplomatic and political cover for exactly the same kind of terrorist attacks, but mounted in Syria. exactly the same kind, but far more deadly, and slaughtering far more people. And not just yesterday, but every day for the last 4 years. The former colonial power, France, is up to its neck in the blood that has been shed in Syria. Now, that's not the fault of the innocents who were murdered in the newspaper office. It's not the fault of the police officers who were cold-bloodedly murdered in the course of their duty. But it remains a fact. And it's a fact of particular moment because the people that France and Britain and the United States and Israel and others in the Persian Gulf, the people that they have been facilitating, the terrorists they've been backing in Syria, are exactly the same kind of people who carried out the terrorist attack in Paris yesterday. These Takfiri, fanatic, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever you want to call them, the people who carried out the murders in Paris yesterday are exactly the kind of people with exactly the same kind of mindset and pledge allegiance to exactly the same terrorist organizations. Yet France and others have strengthened those in Syria and continue to do so, whilst suffering, their citizens at least are suffering the consequences of exactly that kind of terrorism at home. And you'll have to forgive me if I say I told you so. I did warn the British government, the French government, the American government, all governments. I warned them over and over again that the Frankenstein monster that you're building up in Syria will one day be out of control and will hurt you and your citizens and your society. And that's exactly what has happened in Paris yesterday, and it's exactly what has happened elsewhere and what will happen, I have no doubt, in the future. I heard a French journalist on the radio today say, when talking about the brutal professionalism of these murderers yesterday, that for them, she said, it's a war zone. But we, she said, the French are not at war. But that, unfortunately, is simply untrue. France is at war. It's at war overseas, where it's sending its soldiers, and in the case of Syria and Iraq, its aircraft, and sending its special forces, sending its money, its weapons, its political and diplomatic support into war in other people's countries. Well, the reality in the 21st century is that you don't get to pick and choose where the war is. You don't get to restrict the war to other people's countries. Those with whom you are at war, those with whom you are in league in wars, like in Syria, are perfectly capable in this modern globalized world of hurting you here, there, and everywhere. And the problem is, it's almost always entirely innocent people who are murdered. And that's what happened in Paris yesterday. But here's my question. Which of this week's terror attacks will you remember? The proper answer is all of them. But the actual answer is that you'll remember only the terror attacks in Paris. You won't remember even if you ever knew that this very week, Israel and the United States killed and maimed civilian people in terror drone attacks. You will not remember that Al-Shabaab in Somalia executed, murdered in cold blood people in that country. You will not remember that ISIS carried out several terrorist attacks in Iraq and in Syria. You will not remember that many terrorist organizations continued to carry out terror attacks in Syria. You will not remember them because the media will make sure that you fixate, and for a purpose, only on one of this week's terrorist attacks. And their purpose is to keep alive a double standard which lies at the heart of all of this trouble in the world. And it's this, that for the media and the political class in the powerful countries, the blood of some people is worth more than the blood of others. And moreover, they are ready to support the spilling of other people's blood in other countries, hoping, believing, maybe correctly, that the blood being shed in other people's countries will not be much noticed by the public and the voters in the country which is in part responsible. Whereas everyone will have many, many, many days to remember and to dread the consequences of the mass murder in Paris. Already mosques in France have been attacked, some of them with rifles, some of them with grenades. Other bomb plots against French mosques are no doubt being uncovered as I speak. Muslims in many Western countries, including our own, already know that in the wake of this kind of thing, from 9/11 until now, Muslims are in peril. In Birmingham, in England, the city to which I'm about to go, in Birmingham, we have an example of a man on his way back from the mosque, an old man who was beheaded by an anti-Muslim fascist terrorist. He was beheaded just a few weeks, if I recall correctly, before the brutal, cruel murder of Lee Rigby. Not anyone that's watching this will know the name of Muhammad Salim, that old man